Hey, team players, welcome to Local Football Flavors Draft Breakdown. Yes, it's June, but yes, we're talking fantasy football. And why? Because this is when you start getting ready to find out who your winners are to win your leagues. And that's what Bob and I do. We win leagues for people. We win them for ourselves. And if you watch us during the season, we'll give you all of the in-week breakdowns. So we start with this is ESPN's for a 10-man league, 17th round for basic PPR formatting. So in that being said, it's only a one quarterback setup. And as we were going through talking about the draft rounds prior to this, we both brought up about how unless you're getting one of the elite studs at a couple of different positions, tight end, defense, and quarterback, there's a lot of value in waiting, especially in tight ends and in quarterbacks. And this 17th round right here kind of really proves my point. And I don't think I've hidden this back because as we did our breakdowns of every single team, Bob, I made it very clear that if Derrick Carr is eligible for Comeback Player of the Year, I think he's going to win it. I think he has an outside chance at league MVP, just given the fact that he's now going to be paired with a vastly better offensive line, Chris Olave, and I think Carr is going to go off the chain. He is a perfect fit for what that team wants to do. And he is accurate as can be. And I'm getting him in the 17th round. A guy that, in all honesty, I'm high on in real life. And I know he's going to put up points. And I love the song, The Saints Are Coming. And I'm going to hear it 50 million times. And it's all going to be because of Derrick Carr. Not to mention the fact that their running game is in a state of flex. So as I look at this, I get the quarterback for one of the teams I'm most excited about. And then also, Kenny Pickett is one of the most slept-on quarterbacks overall in all of fantasy football, maybe football in general. If you look at his stats on a per-game basis to end the year, Bob, for the last 7 games, he was a top 10 quarterback every single week. He gets his sneaky rushing touchdowns. And most of all, he stopped throwing interceptions the second half of the year. So for all of those that are just looking at the overall year stats, he doesn't look very good. But the reality is he's not bad. So I'm not saying he's great or world-beating, but he's not bad.
So you're saying from week 10 to week 18?
Mm-hmm.
Actually, from week 10 to week 18, he was the 19th best quarterback on a per-point basis.
I started you too early. It's after he played Philadelphia and threw all those interceptions.
So that would have been when? Week 12?
I think it's week 11 or 12.
All right, let's go from week 11. Week 11, we're still seeing Kenny Pickett at the 22nd.
Oh, really? Okay.
It's not saying that he didn't do better because he definitely could have done better. But when we take his stats, Kenny Pickett here, he didn't. I mean, the problem with Kenny Pickett, it's not that he wasn't, trying. It was that he was making a lot of mistakes and a lot of errors. And when you look at what Kenny Pickett, he got scared a lot, started running, doing a lot of running that you really don't want your quarterback to do.
It's almost Daniel Jones level. Not quite there, but getting there.
Yeah, and if you take his numbers, and let's just take his numbers across the entire season so that we have a better look at what the Kenny Pickett year was.
A lot of interceptions early.
Kenny Pickett is ranked... I must have passed him up because that doesn't make any sense. Yeah, 28th. Not starting the first 3 games of the season, but he's not world beating you at any one specific thing. Now,
no, he's not. Not yet.
I would caution and I would say that if you are wanting to take Kenny Pickett or you're wanting to take a guy like Anthony Richardson.
Stream him. No. I'm not making an argument that you should draft Kenny Pickett because I think he's a very streaming quarterback.
Well, let's get to it. There are your league mates are most likely going to have 20 quarterbacks drafted in this league.
Mm-hmm.
Last year,
so who are the 20 you shouldn't? Is basically the question. I think Kenny's on that list.
Last year, the 20th best quarterback in the season across the whole season was Marcus Mariota, followed by Davis Mills, Andy Dalton, Mac Jones, Jacoby Brissett, Jimmy Garoppolo, Matt Ryan, Tannehill, and then Pickett. So you've got to say to yourself, if you are even logically thinking about taking Kenny Pickett, you have to say, well, is there going to be a jump? And if you're taking Kenny Pickett, you most likely already drafted a guy like Patrick Mahomes, Justin Herbert, Lamar Jackson.
He's not your standalone starter.
So you are taking Kenny Pickett into the year, and you're saying, well, let's say something does happen. He could be something that I could trade as a valuable asset. If he does perform and I get him on a bye week, sure, that's going to be a great value for me. The same thing goes with Anthony Richardson. If I can come out of a draft with Anthony Richardson and let's say Jared Goff, I'm not going to be too mad at that, and I'm going to be kind of satisfied and say, all right, well, I'm going to put myself in a position to win games. If Anthony Richardson doesn't work out, well, he doesn't work out, because as I look at this list, there are a couple other players that I might rather have. And actually, Derrick Carr is one of those enigmas for me, because last year he had, I believe, 24 total touchdowns, passing touchdowns. I think like 17, let me see here, 17 interceptions maybe. He threw a lot of picks last year.
There's a reason they didn't bring him back. I mean, that's fair. But I think that being in the new situation, this place is built for him in New Orleans.
So I agree with that. I agree with your statement that it is built for him. But when I look at what he did in the red zone, and I want to say this because this is just a fascinating number that I think you'll enjoy hearing. Patrick Mahomes threw 34 of his touchdowns in the red zone last year. Mm-hmm. Okay. Derrick Carr, on the other hand, and we know Derrick Carr can chuck the ball, right? Derrick Carr only threw 11 of his.
Yeah, that's phenomenal.
So that's about half of Derrick Carr's numbers. And so we would assume, and this is really...
It should be around 80%.
This is the weird part about it, is that, we're sitting here talking, okay, Derrick Carr, what are you going to do this year? And his situation, yes, it's gotten better, but I think the team around him has gotten better. But I don't think that necessarily the situation for him to score more fantasy points got better, because I think here's why I say that.
Oakland only had one downfield receiver, and he was already double teamed like crazy because it was Adams.
Right.
He's going to have two of them here.
I get what you're saying here with Rashid Shaheed, Chris Olave, and Michael Thomas. It's a much better situation. Mm-hmm. But the running situation is something that I think that needs to be looked at, because once they get into the red zone, once the Saints get into the red zone, I don't think they're going to be doing a lot of passing in the red zone. If we look at
that's what they're going to let Taysom Hill just run it in 40 times.
Exactly. If you look at Andy Dalton's numbers last year, and now his metrics aren't good by any means, but he ranked just ahead of Derrick Carr in terms of touchdowns in the red zone. And so it's they got Williams, they have Kamara if he doesn't get suspended. It's a similar, if those wide receivers that have all that speed get tackled within the 5 or get tackled within the 15, Derek Carr, I don't think, is going to throw a touchdown there. So you're relying on those speed guys and those deep threats to get you those touchdowns. And I'm not saying it's a bad thing to rely on. I'm just saying it's less consistent, and one of the reasons why you'll find Derek Carr down at the bottom of the list. Do I think he deserves to be behind Anthony Richardson or just ahead of Kenny Pickett? Absolutely not. Mm-hmm. I think that his situation is better than their situations to very much a better degree. But if you're looking at him and you're saying, okay, who am I going to draft? And you look at the best quarterbacks from last year and you say, okay, well, Patrick Mahomes, Burrow, Allen. You get down here and you're like, well, would I rather have Daniel Jones or Derek Carr? I would tend to believe that you would rather have Derek Carr.
Especially again, like 6 runs later, if not more.
Just for the possibility of, the passing touchdowns, and that, you don't want to have to rely on the rushing touchdowns. But as you get down this list here, Davis Mills ranked 18th. And there's it's weird that Davis Mills is ahead of Derek Carr. Those numbers.
It's the interceptions. You throw that many interceptions, problems happen.
the numbers in the red zone for them. I mean, we would think that Houston wasn't a red zone team last year, and we would think that that Las Vegas was, but he was behind Davis Mills, and that was just one of those things in terms of red zone stats that I think is interesting to look at. So when you look at the players on a week-to-week basis here, even without being in the red zone that much, Derrick Carr ranked 17th in points per game, or 17th in total points. And so that's behind only Russell Wilson, Tua, Lamar,
and Aaron Rodgers. Brought Wilson up because last year we got all over Russell Wilson for playing hero ball, putting things on his shoulder, and absolutely failing. Carr did very similar. And granted, I'm about as high on Carr as anyone possibly can be. Carr did something similar, and also at the end of the year, it was very clear they weren't bringing Carr back, and they let him know it. So at that point,
he didn't play 2 games.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. So when we factor this in, I do think that new situation is going to be vastly better for him.
I think you could definitely see Derrick Carr in the top 10 of fantasy quarterbacks, and to get him down here is a very much of a steal, because you might logistically, if you've planned out your draft in the way that you want, you logistically could have Tua and Derrick Carr. And if you know you want to go into this leaving with Derrick Carr, you can wait and pair him up with, let's just say,
if you know you want Derrick Carr, you might as well just draft them in the 15th round and then not put a second one on your roster and then just stream the bye week, because you're going to be playing let's go for the gusto on the other ones, right, all the other draft picks.
Yeah, the problem with saying that, I want to get this guy in this specific round is that I think by August, we're going to really know where Derrick Carr stands in the rankings.
All these guys.
I think Derrick Carr is going to jump up in rankings a lot.
I don't know about
that. I do. I think he's going to jump up a lot just for the sheer fact that there's going to be these unknown situations that we look at the quarterbacks and we say, okay, do I trust Anthony Richardson? Do I trust C.J. Stroud? Do I trust everybody who's changed situations like Aaron Rodgers? I think if you're really looking at this and you really want to,
I think I trust Carr more than Rodgers.
I was still going to say that if you want to build your team and what situation is better, Derrick Carr has walked into a better situation with a more granted, we both don't like Michael Thomas, but if Michael Thomas ends up coming back and performing to the best of his abilities, that's lights out. That's going to be great for Derrick Carr.
I'm doing it expecting Thomas never to play again.
Well, even if you expect him not to play again, I mean, let's not belabor the point here. Derrick Carr, out of these three quarterbacks, is the best, and out of the last couple of round quarterbacks, the only person that I think that I like more than Derrick Carr in this region of players in terms of quarterback would be Russell Wilson, because I think his coach I think he's going to be coached a lot better this year, and he's going to be trusted a lot more. And when you trust Russell Wilson to be not a hero, and you trust him and you say, hey, Russ, you're making mistakes, you're doing this, stop it, I think that that's going to be good. And I think that Derrick Carr's walked into a situation now where he's just like, okay, well, now I have a reliable threats at each point. I have a nice running game. I'm going to be protected. My defense isn't bad. So, it's old, but it's not bad. And so you're going into it and you're saying that Derrick Carr looks pretty good. So going to these other players, though.
Yeah, let's go to the receivers.
There's an interesting situation here. And Jameson Williams, I feel that if he ever plays a full season, he's going to be very, very dominant. But again, caught with gambling. So
he was an early second-round pick?
Yeah, last year it was the PEDs. This year it's gambling, out for 6 games. Or something like that. I just don't.
Immaturity. I don't know what does.
I just don't see the reason why. I mean, we've waited on players before, like DeAndre Hopkins and stuff, but I don't see why you would need to wait on Jameson Williams here. I feel that somebody's going to take a streamer on him in your last round or the last 2 rounds, or he's going to end up in your free agency pool if you really want him. If you have an IR slot, he's not going to be eligible for the IR slot this year with the gambling. So he's going to take up a roster space, and roster spaces are very valuable at the beginning of the year. And I don't think that at this point in time in the year, you even need to be thinking about Jameson Williams.
I don't know. I kind of like the idea of keeping him instead of a second quarterback. or second defense. I like the idea of knowing when he's on the field, he's their number 2 receiver. The fact that I can get a number 2 receiver on an offense that scores a lot, they all Detroit, to make Keller's wearing the same team. Detroit has their tight end fell apart when they traded Hopkins. Although they had decent production, it wasn't, we need to jump on this. Jameson Williams is going to step into a very
good
spot.
Joe. Hold on. Who was on the phone? Okay, it wasn't Best Buy?
No.
Okay. All right, go ahead.
So I like Jameson Williams because he's going to be stepping into the number 2 receiving spot on an offense that's going to be scoring good. He's also going to be one of these guys that people are going to have circled for when he returns. And if you're willing to eat the cost of having that roster spot sucked up for the first 6 weeks, which if you play your bye games correctly, you just pick a quarterback who buys past that.
I'm going to interrupt, and I'm going to posit it from this perspective. I'm not talking about taking him at the cost of a second quarterback or anything like that, or a second defense.
I'm talking about just home run potential. Even though I'm only going to get him for 12 weeks, he has potential for high upside potential, more than maybe anyone else on this list except for Carr.
I get it, but here's the thing that I think that a different perspective needs to be put in there for that, because I do follow that perspective for some players, but for Jameson Williams' case, is by week 7 or week 6 or 7, that by the time he's going to come back, you have already gone through about half of your fantasy football season. Now, he's going, when he comes back, sure, he can be the player that's going to get you to the playoff push, but you have constructed your team to the point where you are going to be in the playoff push.
Oh, yeah.
And I think with Jameson Williams here is that if you are taking him, you're basically taking a slot away from a slot away from your bench to say, okay, for these 6 weeks, if I have injuries or if I have something happen, he's the guy I have to get rid of instead of getting rid of somebody else. Because this is the thing. I've done this before with players. I've had friends that do this with players. Then they've waited for a player to come back. And yeah, sometimes it smacks. Sometimes it's really good and it does work. But you are always in the back of your mind saying, well, I've drafted him. I've got to keep him on my roster. I've got, even if one of my players gets hurt and I put them on the IR, say you don't even have an IR spot in your league. You might even not have an IR spot in your league. And you take, and you don't. And so, you drop that player that got hurt, but say they come back in week 3 or whatever, and they come back and they tear it up too. And then Jameson Williams is sitting there doing nothing for 6 weeks on your roster. That's just another perspective to take. I'm not saying that either way is the way to think about it or that any one way is the right way to think about it. But I think with Jameson Williams, particularly after he came back last year after the injury, he got 1 catch. And then, you come in and you're saying, well, he's not able to put a full season in the OTAs. He's not able to do X, Y, Z. Why am I waiting on a guy that has seen the field maybe 40 times in his professional NFL career? It doesn't make any sense to wait on him. Now, for example, I'm going to give you a different example. Let's say a guy like Odell Beckham is there, DJ Chark is there, and Jameson Williams is there. We know that Odell Beckham is much older. We know he's coming off an injury. We know DJ Chark could be pretty good too. And he's set up with a Panthers team that is going to pass the ball. They're going to try to get their young quarterback motivated and moving. They've got a lot of old veterans. And you say to yourself, okay, well, at least for the first 6 weeks of the season, maybe Odell Beckham's going to turn up in the first 3 weeks. After week 3, maybe he'll fall apart. Maybe I'll trade him. Maybe I'll dump him. But at least I know I've got 3 weeks. And I'm not saying you're putting Odell Beckham into your lineup week 1. You shouldn't have to. Don't do that. But if you do have to do that, it's much better to put somebody to draft people on your roster, to get them to be healthy on your roster week 1. And then, unless it's like a super stud. Unless
I look at this different.
Eckler and he gets hurt.
And this is a broader draft theory that we have, and this is the difference. I believe from the 10th round on, you don't draft people based upon their floor. You only draft them based upon their ceiling.
I'm not disagreeing with that.
And for that reason, I would never consider Odell Beckham because I know that Beckham is going to be a diminishing asset as the year goes on. Last episode, you brought up Kareem Hunt. Best game was week 1 and then literally phased out of the offense from that point forward. Odell Beckham is almost guaranteed to destroy the Ravens receiving room because he's not the best athlete in that room. That's clearly Zay Flowers. He's the loudest mouth who thinks he has the ego who should get the ball, period. And he's not the most seniority star on that team. That's Andrews. This is the literal last chance for him to do anything. And his body doesn't let him do it anymore. I don't want to touch Beckham at all, except for letting him blow up someone else's fantasy team.
I mean, so that's this completely point, fair.
When we're taking my bench, I want my starters. My starters are my floor guys. I want my bench to be so obvious that I have to play this guy because he is hitting on his potential, or I don't care if I cut him. And because I'm already going to have 3 guys like that, I'm okay with sitting on Williams to come around and be healthy. Because here's the other part. What happens if in week 6, Ahmad goes down again? Then I have the number one receiver.
I'm not disagreeing. I'm not disagreeing at all with the way you're going about thinking about it. But I do think you when you walk into a season, and you've done this with DeAndre Hopkins, you've done this with a couple other players.
Did it with Hopkins and Gallup last year.
When you walk into the season, you said to yourself last year, I'm gonna take the championship. I'm gonna be the highest scoring team. When Gallup comes back, it's gonna be great. Mm-hmm. It wasn't great for you all the time. It didn't work out all the time.
I missed the playoffs by 1 game in that league.
So you get the.
Well, I would have won the whole thing had I made it.
Right. You get what I'm saying, though, is that when you wait on a guy and you've waited so long, you are unsure of that production that's coming. And the reason I'm saying that don't take Jameson Williams in your draft, maybe wait on him or trade for him as he's coming about to the end, is that so trade for him as the suspension is ending, is that you are then fielding a full roster of players that you can choose from to say, I think, let's just say, for example, you go into your draft, you take your starters, and then your bench is something like Flowers, Gallup, Michael Thomas, whatever you want to say. And you want to say that my bench is going to have to outproduce something to even see the field. Yeah, that's true. Your bench is going to have to outproduce your starter at one point in time for you to even consider it, or your bye week. But when do bye weeks start?
Week 5, I believe.
Okay, week 5. So you want to try to take a player that you could trade to get another player. And Jameson Williams isn't the guy that's going to do that.
Oh, in that regards, Beckham's that guy because you could get him early, you could smack, and then you can move him.
And then you could trade him for somebody like Jameson Williams and maybe another asset for your team. That's the only reason I'm saying that you have to be really careful about taking a player that's already going into the season injured. I'm okay doing that if it's a known commodity like DeAndre Hopkins, if it's a known commodity like Michael Gallup. I am not okay doing that for a guy that we have not even seen play.
And that's very fair. So, Bob, here, as we conclude this episode, let's give us your rankings.
Well, Leonard Fournette's not even there. I mean, I don't know why he's ranked. I'm also not ranking Harrison Butker for the same reason I said about kickers. They're both at the bottom of my rankings. At the top of the rankings, I'm going to put Derrick Carr, number 1. I really like Derrick Carr's situation. DJ Chark is number 2. I think that he provides a really good value for the Carolina Panthers, and I think he's going to really have a good year. I think he's going to be a well-utilized asset in that offense. My third one is going to be Odell Beckham. I think that there's going to be some diminishing returns on Odell Beckham, but I think the first couple of weeks are going to be good enough that, or he's going to be loud enough that it's going to turn into some fantasy points. You're probably not going to start him, but even if you come across and he has a good game at the beginning of the year. These all depend on Lamar, and Lamar has better at the beginning of the year than he is at the end of the year. So there's something to say about that. Then I'm going to put Anthony Richardson. I think Anthony Richardson's situation is very unique because I don't think that the Colts are that far off as a team. They just had bad quarterbacking last year. So I think that should be fairly decent for them. Then I'm going to rank the Eagles and Broncos defense basically the same to me. I think the Eagles defense is stellar, and I think the Broncos defense has a good opportunity to get a lot of sacks and a lot of interceptions this year. And their schedules doesn't have the NFC East in it. So, I mean, like, there's a benefit to that. But it does have their AFC West opponents, and they play Patrick Mahomes twice. They play Justin Herbert twice. So that's not going to be a benefit to them.
And they also do play Miami, though, and the Bills.
And then then I'm putting Jameson Williams there. Jameson Williams, for the reasons we've said and talked about probably way too much, is
the concept.
I would put him there, and then then I would put Butker, and my two undraftables at least here is Kenny Pickett and Fournette. I don't even want them on the waiver wire. These are just two total avoids for me.
So for me, it's Carr number one. Like I said, I'm all over him. I love the Williams play. It's why I was defending it the whole time. Then would come Sharp. I do like his potential here. I have Eagles as my number one defense, but this is to show the perspective. I'd rather have a guy on my team who's going to miss 6 weeks than take a defense this early. Quite frankly, it's the 17th round. I'm saying this early. Then come the Eagles. Following that is going to come Richardson. And Richardson, to me, is another one of these complete floaters in the exact same lines as Williams, because if he hits, he's great, but there's also a chance he never sees a field. So that's a fact of life. Following that would be the Broncos. I hate their schedule. I hate the fact that they got 2 against the Chargers, 2 against the Chiefs, and then the AFC East. And then the rest of these, Bob, are either undraftable or just a guy to me. Kenny would be one I would at least have on my team at some point. I don't want Beckham on my team. Butker I would take on my team, but again, too early for a kicker. And Fournette's a free agent, so we don't draft them. So that's how I look at this overall. And if you haven't already, click subscribe, become a team player. And we are going to be doing a best ball league here as we approach August. So leave your contact information, email us, and you can find us on our homepage here. And we'll see you guys from there.